What do you do when everything you've been taught, the way you've been raised, the culture and the ideologies you've been immersed in since you were a child, what do you do when you realize most, if not all of that was a lie? We've talked a lot on the podcast about my journey, through Zionism as a Jewish person and separating from that and becoming anti-Zionist and what that means. But what about from the Christian perspective, from the Christian Zionist perspective? Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations for the People with Matthew Solomon. I'm Matthew Solomon, and I'm so excited to have Mark Wayne on the program today. I recently found Mark Wayne, one of his Instagram videos came across my timeline, and he was talking about his journey being raised inside of Christian Zionism, being raised in a military family, moving to Israel to learn Hebrew, to join the IDF, to go fight against, quote, those evil people over there. And he had an awakening through connections with Palestinian people, through realizations and understanding, like, separating from his upbringing. And I reached out to him because I was so inspired and I wanted to talk more and hear more about his story. And so I'm excited to have him on the show today and for you all to get a chance to connect with Mark. So without any further ado, please welcome Mark Wayne. Mark, it's so great to have you here.
Yeah, it's great to be here, man.
Yeah,
I really like what you're doing.
thank you, thank you. And just to share with the people who are watching and listening, like I found out about you like 2, 3 days ago, and I saw one of your I don't know if it was TikTok or Instagram. I saw it on Instagram. There was a video where you were talking about having been a Christian Zionist and then
Mhm.
spent time in Israel. And I'll let you explain that, but how that got you like to be anti-Zionist and your perspective on the region and what we're doing there in the United States, but also what's the horrors that are happening to the Palestinian people. And so I was so moved by that I reached out, and luckily, like, we're here having this conversation. So I really appreciate you taking the time and using your voice in ways that are really needed right now.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate you. I appreciate you appreciating that video enough to
Yeah.
reach out to me. So thanks.
Yeah. So if you would just like, well, I guess we can just drop right into it. If you would share a little bit about your story and what that was that you were talking about and, where you're at now.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as far as my childhood, it's not an uncommon story when it comes to evangelical Zionism. I grew up as an army brat. My dad was a chaplain in the army, so we grew up at different spots. I lived in 5 different states, and growing up in a Christian family, we and moving a lot, we would always have to find whenever we'd pull up our roots and lay those roots somewhere else in a different state, my parents would look for a church for us to go to. So just the general landscape of American Christianity is just rife with Zionism. It's kind of like the standard protocol for all churches. You support Israel because Israel is the physical incarnation of the ancient Israelites coming back to the Holy Land as prophesied. So that is kind of the framing that every church, just about every church in the United States has. And that's put on steroids in the evangelical community, which goes even farther and really hones in on that and starts really pushing end times prophecies in the context of modern day Israel, which is a very huge fallacy, but it's very effective at getting that demographic on board with whatever Israel does. So that's
Yeah.
the context. So this was in Kansas City. It was called Sheffield Family Life Center was the name of the church that my parents wound up choosing. Now, my parents were not like hardcore Zionists, right? They're just Christian parents who are trying to find a church. And what comes along with that, of course, is what happens to the church. So that this is around age 14. that church really focused in on end times prophecy. And of course, me being at a young impressionable age, I'm absorbing all of that and taking in all the what you call philo-Semitism,
Mm.
you know, mythologizing Jews and mythologizing Israel. It's all part of it, all part of the package. So that just led to me being really fascinated with Israel because it makes you think that, well, I want to be involved in this biblical storyline that's ongoing,
Yeah.
and you want to be a part of that in this because you get visions of grandeur
Hmm.
in this society. It's the need to want to be a part of the biblical storyline because that's all you learn when you grow up. So
Yeah.
I hope that explains it.
Yeah, I have a question before we go on, because
Yeah.
I'm Jewish and I was raised
Hmm.
inside of Jewish Zionism. I'm not a Zionist anymore.
Right.
And I remember, like, during the Obama years, one of the many things that were said negatively about him was, people who were Christian who, were not Jewish were like, "Oh, he hates Israel." And I remember thinking, why do so many people care about Israel? Because to
Yeah.
me, inside of how I was raised, it was always a Jewish state. We're there because everybody hates us. And so to hear that be used in that way was always fascinating. And so I'm curious about that. And then curious about when you were talking about the mythology of Jewish people and Israel. Um, was there, I mean, I'm assuming there's anti-Semitism woven into that, stereotypes or whatnot, but maybe not. I'm just curious what that mythology was, because I didn't live inside of that.
Well, I guess the biggest mythology is I guess Matt Lieb. I had him on our podcast with Bad Hasbro, and we went into depth about this topic. It was the first time I was able to decompress with a fellow and former Zionist, with him, and we were taught. He told me about philo-Semitism. So it wasn't so much as a negative anti-Semitism in the evangelical community. It's more like mythologizing the fact that the Jew the Jewish people being overly chosen, like it's like they're the chosen people, and therefore they have impunity for whatever happens in Israel because it's all part of the prophecy coming true.
Mm.
So the mythology also is interwoven into Israel's history, and starting at 1948, where churches often highlight miracles that happen in during the wars that saved Israel,
Yeah.
and that a lot of that is, and most Christians believe that stuff because they put it out in books, they have TV specials on it, they really put out a lot of media talking about the miracles of these wars and how God saved Israel because they were outnumbered and outmatched by their enemies and they should have gotten destroyed. When you look back at the military operations details of those things, you realize, oh well, they're overly financed. They had advanced weaponry, and they had the backing of the most powerful empire in the world, the United States. So all that breaks apart, but you won't see that when you're in that bubble. It's
Yeah.
hard to see. So,
That's what I was, one of the many things that I was raised with was,
mm-hmm.
uh we're all alone, everybody hates us.
Yep,
After 1948, like the day after we were attacked, from all sides, that we should
yes,
there was, no way we could have won, but God was on our side, and
yes.
that's how we prevailed. Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah.
It's
Um
it's the same thing. Yeah,
yeah. Um okay, so then jumping ahead, you moved to Israel, right? To
yep, yeah. So, graduated on a military base in Utah. It's they call it Area 52 is the name of it, but it's
uh-huh.
called Dugway Proving Ground. So I, growing up, like, spending my last 2 years of high school on the military base, I wanted to get out and I wanted to go see the world. Um, and one of those things was I wanted to go to Israel because of simply my fascination with Israel due to the evangelical indoctrination of it being the chosen country. So I'm like, oh, well, I must go fight for the chosen country. I have to go join the IDF. So I was starting to study Hebrew, and I guess a segue or a step ladder to that reality was going to Hebrew University. So I asked my parents, hey, can I enroll in the Hebrew Ulpan, which is like a Hebrew program for foreign exchange or foreign student. So they're like, they're more than happy to send me over there. They were excited about it too. And so, booked the 2005 Ulpan summer Ulpan class and started that program and arrived in Jerusalem. And then of course they assigned you your dorm, you know, on the Mount Scopus campus. So yeah, that's how it started, you know.
Yeah. And so what happened when you were there? Because you went there, you were or you were wanting to be immersed in the Jewish Israeli
Mhm.
culture, right? Through what you learned in Christian Zionism.
Yeah,
Uh and then yeah, I remember you were saying like you were in a dorm with Palestinians. Was that correct?
yeah, yeah. So they on Mount Scopus campus, they handed you a piece of paper with your building number, your dorm room number, and your floor number. So, you know, I arrived at my dorm floor, and of course, I'm excited. I'm in Jerusalem, and I had never met a Palestinian before. In fact, never really talked to Muslims, because along with that philo-Semitism that was preached to us in churches, you also had Islamophobia preached to you. Now, it wasn't so much anti-Arab, so I wasn't racist towards Arabs, but we were taught that Islam was like a huge global monolith conspiracy, and they would even attribute ancient prophecies about the enemies of Israel to Islam. It was, they
Mm-hmm.
would twist all kinds of things. So I had a very fucked up view of Islam,
Yeah.
as a kid. So I arrive on the dorm floor, and there's one other American. He was an ex-Marine. He was also evangelical Christian. He happened to be the only non-Jewish person on the flight with me over there, and we became good friends too, me and that guy. But the dorm room next to him, the door was open, and heard a lot of loud screaming and joking, and all in Arabic, and it was about 5 or 6 Palestinian Muslims, and me being kind of like intrepid when it came to wanting to introduce myself to people that are on the other side of the aisle, the first thing I said, I walked in the dorm, I said, "What's up, you terrorist motherfuckers?" That's the first thing I said
Yeah.
to these Palestinian guys. And I always tell the story because it's so funny. I was just talking to one of these guys yesterday on the phone, how we were reflecting back on that day, and a third of them wanted to kick my ass, of
Mm.
course. The other third was laughing, of course. They thought it was hilarious, and then the other third wanted to kick my ass, but also thought it was kind of funny. So we, I sat down with them and we started arguing. Got right into it. I mean, just
Wow.
didn't even scroll. I mean, the introductions, yeah, but we got right into the politics, and we're just yelling at each other, joking with each other, making fun of each other, smoking hookah, eating hummus, and that was when I was just unloading all the propaganda that I was
Yeah.
taught right then and there. And they were so entertained by it. It just led to 3 hours of hilarious dialogue and interchange between me and these guys. And they probably deprogrammed about 3 years of propaganda in that 3 hours. I mean, it was great. I mean, it was because it was such a gloves off environment. We were just tearing each other apart with our rhetoric in kind of like a comical way. But
Hmm.
I learned so much in just those 3 hours, and and I realized that I really, really like these guys. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't so much the politics; it was just their culture. I don't know, just the brotherly interchange you have with them. Not overly polite. It was actually just very personal.
Hmm.
So as if we knew each other for years. So that's when the deprogramming started. Was that?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And so what was it? I mean, I know that, I've had moments because we were talking before that, I've had moments in my life where it was like, oh, wait, what I was taught wasn't true. And then
Mm-hmm,
there's another layer of that. And then it's like, oh, not only is that not true, but all of these horrific things are being inflicted on these people based
mm-hmm.
on this stuff that I thought was true wasn't. And so what were some of those moments like? Or how did those come about where you had these realizations?
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it. It was like layers upon layers. Well, I guess first of all was this idea that um, Palestinians hate Jews and they hate America and they hate Americans. I mean, we all hate America. We all hate the American government. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was just that they're steeped in radical ideology of harming people, and it all that was one layer of just the demon. First is getting rid of the notion um of Arabs and Palestinians being some type of stereotype, you know.
Hmm.
That's like one of the first steps. Next step is, oh, then you realize, okay, well, that means that the people who are telling me that were lying. And then you realize that they're not the moral nation that we've been taught. Israel is not this victim of global hatred out of nowhere.
Hmm.
I'm sure there's anti-Semitism involved in hatred of Israel, no doubt, but
Yeah.
it's just their actions and the way that they treat human beings that results in this hatred of Israel. So then you realize that Israel is not a victim.
Hmm.
And then you realize that Israeli society is not this righteous society that we were told of people. You know, they're very liberal and they have a lot of freedoms, I guess. They're very open-minded about certain things. They like to party, but then they just have this really toxic sense of supremacy and this hatred of Palestinians and this paranoia that the whole world hates them because they're Jews, not because of the actions towards Palestinians. So, and what's interesting was the American Jewish students who were with me at that time, who weren't in the same program, I saw their unraveling happen as well, their disillusionment. So to see them become disillusioned like I was, but from their Jewish perspective,
Hmm.
American Jewish perspective versus my evangelical American perspective, really fascinating to watch, to see that happen.
Yeah.
And it goes to show it's not a Jewish thing, because these American Jews were just as disillusioned as I was, but they were doing their own journey through it,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I've talked about this on other episodes, and one of the things that's been really challenging for me in the last year is anti-Semitism does happen. I've experienced that.
Yeah,
I've had when people come after me, it's usually something anti-Semitic. When I've gotten
right.
pushback on things, especially, like the whole self-hating Jew thing, that's a whole other level to get anti-Semitism from Jewish people. It's like, wow, like how did, yeah. Um,
Yeah,
and recognizing that uh that does happen, but that in our name, like you were saying, like it's not like the hatred towards Israel, which in I think often gets conflated with Judaism. But I think in the
yeah,
last year there's been a lot of dialogue that's separating that, even the whole Zionism part, right? I didn't
yes,
really understand what that was until the process of like the last few years,
yeah,
and like the implications of that, and that not all Jews are Zionists. And I knew that there have always been Jewish people that opposed the state of Israel and the establishment
yeah,
of a religious state. But I didn't realize how many there were. And so, yeah, it's been like a whole identity thing, which it sounds like it's really fascinating, because it sounds like that was an identity thing for you inside of Christian Zionism,
hmm,
and the mythology and the ideology, and this is who I am, and I'm going to go fight for these people, for this land because it's the chosen land. And me
yeah,
having that, and having grandparents who are Holocaust survivors, who most of their family was murdered
mm,
because they were Jewish. But yeah, it's
yeah,
like this whole unraveling to the point where, for me, and I don't know about you, but there was like, well, who am I, and what is, like, what is up and what is down, in a very
yeah.
different way than waking up to how the United States has done similar things.
Absolutely. Yeah. The two are connected, by the way. The two of what the United States has done and what Israel's done. You can't separate the two in all reality. So when I got there, 2000, this 2005, like summer 2005, I start traveling to their villages. Um, I get to know Palestine in a way that very few, I mean, definitely no Israeli has ever experienced. Very few American students. I mean, nobody in the Hebrew University Ulpan, none of the American Jewish students went as far. I mean, they got disillusioned from Israel, and they definitely grew a sense of empathy for Palestinians, but they never went as far as actually immersing themselves in Palestinian culture. Maybe a little bit, but I just got immersed in it because I would go visit their villages, went to the West Bank, and then I just realized how much I fell in love with the culture. And I realized that there's nothing on this planet like this culture. They have a code of honor that uh, literally allows the Palestinians to govern themselves without any form of government over them. Like if there was no government in Israel whatsoever, the Palestinians would be just fine because their code of honor governs itself. And it was really fascinating to see that, and just how biblical they were, how their customs, their etiquette, um, all of that just resonated with me so much, way more than Israeli society, which Israeli society was kind of like discombobulated, and it didn't really have roots. It's kind of based on paranoia. Maybe it's based on a little artsiness, I guess. But there was not any real thing that was holding Israeli society together other than the world is out there and we're right here,
Mm.
and we need each other or we're gonna die, and we have to keep these Palestinians under control or they're gonna kill us. It's
Yeah.
just, and I realize it's not 100% the fault of the kids, because especially Israeli children who are raised this way in their schools and in their yeshivas, but as they get to an adult, as they become an adult, they have the freedom to go get information. They can go visit the West Bank to see for themselves. So that's where it becomes less of an excuse the older that an Israeli gets to excuse himself. So I just realized that I had more in common with the Palestinians than I did with the Israelis, and it was a struggle because I'm like, I'm not supposed to be feeling this way. I'm supposed to be a Zionist. I'm supposed to be joining the IDF, and so I kind of convinced myself, like, okay, well, I love these Palestinians. They're like family to me now, but maybe I should still join the IDF because I can be a good influence on the
Hmm.
IDF, right? Like, that's that kind of like Messiah complex you get.
Yeah.
You're gonna go in and you're gonna. I had that. I got that big time, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I'm gonna teach them about Jesus, and, and and teach them about the love of Jesus. And one of my Palestinian friends had a conversation with me. He's like, Mark, listen to me, Mark. Don't join. They're gonna turn you into a murderer. And I'm like,
Mm.
what do you mean? And I'm like, trust me. He said they're gonna put you in a situation that's gonna make you violate all of your moral principles. And then at that point, I lost a friend. So he said, don't join. And I'm like, so after that, after he told me that, I suddenly got very, very lazy. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's a lot of paperwork. I got to go get my high school transcripts. You're right. So, but I was going to join. I was about to join the IDF, and who knows where I'd be right. So he talked me
Yeah.
out of that. So that was a summer old pawn. I went back to the United States, and then and they, by the way, when I was with the Palestinians, they told me all kinds of things about the United States empire, what we're guilty of. And this is during the Bush administration, of course. And of course, I was a Bush fan at the time,
Mhm.
um, and I was such a simp for Bush. I would get personally offended when they would insult Bush and stuff like that. So they told me all these things about the United States that I just couldn't believe at first, and I was hesitant to believe. I'm like, no, that's not true, and when I went back to the United States, I did some research. I had some time and space to start researching all this, and then I saw the truth. It's the stuff that they were talking about. And that's when I fell into a deep depression, not just because of the Israeli part, but also because of what my own country that I've been patriotic about all my life, the American empire, what we've done. It's all facade. All the mythology that's been applied to Israel has also been a part of American society. How Christopher Columbus discovered the United, he was this chosen by God to discover the new world. And when he found out he was a genocidal maniac who sliced open pregnant women with a sword, the most psychotic human being, evil person on this planet. is Christopher Columbus, and you just you start to unravel the American mythology and the American roots. It's
Yeah.
all just it's the same thing that they do in Israel. They mythologize the founding of this country, and they put the founding fathers as like these saints, these demigods,
Yeah.
and and then I went through a depression because I grew up from a very patriotic family bloodline. My great grandfather, they call him the grandfather of the United States, Lieutenant Governor Robert Dinwiddie, the guy who promoted George Washington to general. That's my grandfather, and
Wow.
it's ingrained in my family tree. We have a house that we have family reunions on. We have a whole book on our family heritage of the United States. So
Wow.
to learn that my deepest family roots, because my family's been in this country since 1780 or something like that. We go back, and
Yeah.
so it was like it was truly a depressing moment because you realize that everything that I am, my whole bloodline, is full of genocidal murderers who are responsible for the Native American genocide. Robert Dinwiddie sent George Washington to basically essentially kick off what would become the extermination of the Native American. That's my grandfather.
Wow.
So when you dig into these roots, you you realize that it's all been a ruse, and you go through a depression. But so after that depression, in order to solve the depression, I went back to Jerusalem, signed up with the Winter Ulpan, and then what would later become the Spring Ulpan, and and I went back and basically told my Palestinian friends, like, you're right, like, yeah, you're right, you know. And they
Wow.
were there. They were there with me as I went through that journey of depression. I remember calling them up through Skype. Remember when people used to use Skype?
Yep.
Call
Yeah.
them up on Skype, and I'll tell them I'm going through depression, man. I'm like, I can't, like, I have no motivation. And they were so concerned about it. Like, Mark, listen, go help your community. Go do this, go do that. Just, do something that helps you. They were so concerned with me, and they walked me through that depression. It's not like they were like, haha, sucker, I told you so. No, my Palestinian friends were very concerned with my mental health. And so I went back to Jerusalem. I actually surprised them. They didn't know I was going to show up. I showed up on their dorm, and then spent another 6 months in Palestine, and did some more crazy stuff. And that's a whole other, episode of my experience the second time around.
Yeah.
Now somewhat deprogrammed from American fantasy, but still having a little bit of Zionist left in me because I was kind of like, well, okay, the way the Israelis are acting, the way that they founded this country was very messed up, but I still believe that Jews have the right to come back to the Holy Land. And then so I had a lot more work to be done yet, for years to come. But the core, the most toxic elements of Zionism were definitely deprogrammed out of me, like the dehumanization of Palestinians. So
Yeah. Wow. It's so powerful. I mean, the fact that uh that when you were going to join, thinking that you could change it from the inside, and they were like,
mm,
Don't do it. Just don't do
yeah,
it because it's gonna turn." Like I hear that with people in my life regarding not just the military, but the police, and
yeah,
there's, and I'm more immersed in the policing side of things, and how,
yeah,
like, I know people who have gone in who are like, yeah, I'm going to try and change it from the inside. And then, a
never
couple
worked
years
out.
in, it's like, yeah, this isn't, there's no way to do that.
Yes.
So jumping ahead, so what is it like? Where are you at now? What are you doing now? What are the things that like, how do you see things now, and ways that uh you're using your voice, and you're like, because obviously we can get in certain spaces because we're white, white
Hmm.
men. So I'm
Yes.
just curious, like, what are the things that you're doing now, and how is, yeah.
Well, after October 7th, first thing I did was call up my Palestinian friends, these friends, the ones I just mentioned, and you know, just I was talking with them because I know they were very stressed out, because they knew what was going to come. They knew that after October 7th, they knew that Israel is going to use it as an excuse to commit a genocide on Gaza. And I I'd never been involved with activism for that for the most part. I did some march. I did a march with the Black Lives Matter movement or Black Lives Matter thing a few years ago, but never been involved in any activism because I don't really come from like a liberal background, so I don't really know much. I didn't know much about activism, but I really wanted to lift my voice up for the Palestinians because I knew they were in trouble and I had to stand up and I owed it to them because Palestine, in many ways, created the person who I am today. I learned a lot of the morals and values that I've carried with me all these years because of Palestinians got a hold of me at a young, impressionable age before the Zionists got a hold of me. I mean, so for me, it's like, I owe it to the Palestinians. Like they're my people. I gotta say something. But I'm like, well, I don't want to join this movement alone, you know, because I know I'll get shredded to bits. I'm going to come across a certain way because I have a certain thing about me that doesn't scream left wing. I'm a redneck. I'm conservative on on certain topics. Like, I love my guns. I love a lot of stuff that typical rednecks love, but I'm like, I'm gonna get shredded to bits. So I was like, I'm not joining unless I'm joining with a fellow vet. If me and a vet
Mm.
go in, I'll join this movement and I'll scream at the top of my lungs, but I go with you with a vet. So I was kind of like scrolling through TikTok, and then I saw this one guy post a video with long hair, and I'm like, I like this guy's vibe, Greg Stoker. So I saw Greg Stoker make this video calling out to vets. I forgot how exactly the wording went, but he says, "Hey, if you're a combat vet and you are not standing up against the empire, you need to fix yourself because we're 3 weeks in and there's no excuse anymore." So and he says, it's like he basically had this forgiving tone about him where he was saying, "Listen, hey, we've all made mistakes, we've all been duped by the empire. Let's just stand up now." So it was a very forgiving tone, and I'm like, dude, that's the guy I need to start a podcast with. So I sent him a comment. This is when Greg had like 3,000 followers or something.
Mm.
I said, "Hey, bro, you want to start a podcast for vets who want to stand up for Palestine?" He got back to me right away. He said, "Yeah, sure." And then we procrastinated for like 3 months. And then during that 3 months, he got really big because he picked a fight with an IDF Instagram influencer,
Mm.
picked a fight, and he won. And it was great because that whole drama. I encourage anybody to go check that out. The drama between this guy called Matan Peretz. He's like an IDF thirst trap,
Mm.
uh, who's there to spew idea of propaganda. Greg picked a fight with him. They started doing some clapbacks. Greg won. Greg shot to the roof and just he got big because of his content. Him breaking down the military aspects of the whole situation. So we got the podcast going, and it's been a great venue for me to um, speak up for Palestine my my personal story with Palestinians.
Yeah.
So it's been a great segue. And because of Greg's fame through the movement, my story has been able to ride on those coattails to the people who need to hear it.
Yeah. Awesome. I have seen his content and yeah, it's very, very powerful.
Yeah,
I will say if you come further, far enough to the left, we got guns too. So,
I heard that.
yeah,
Yeah, I heard
we
that.
got
Yeah,
room for
I know.
you.
Well, what's interesting is this journey, by standing up for the Palestinians, it has led me into this whole world of left wing ideologies and people that I never knew about. I mean,
Yeah.
my view of the left wing, quote unquote, has completely changed. Like I am in love with the left. And especially the farther left, the more I'm in love with it. I mean, I'm like, holy, like this is a this is like my tribe. I don't
Yeah.
know if I would go as far as saying that I'm left because I don't like to throw them a label. I don't want to put like a label on myself
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. But
Same.
at the same time, I'm like, I just have so much appreciation for them. And every day I'm learning something new. And
Yeah.
so that's what this movement has done. I mean, that's what's so insane about it. It has literally broken down the barriers that once separated people who had different ideologies. And, and there's nothing that could have done that except for Palestine. Like this
Yeah.
is never happened in the history of mankind has this many different people from this many different demographics been able to put down their differences for the sake of humanity. And through that has created so much understanding between different factions
Yeah.
throughout our cultures. And I don't know how Palestine did it, but they did. And it doesn't surprise me that it was they're the ones that did it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's just worth noting also, like, Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers and the first Rainbow
Mm,
Coalition, like he recognized, like, we're all in the same struggle. We're just, you
yep.
know, uh we're being directed to hate each other. And like when we get together, we're fighting the same empire. And
Yeah.
then, of course he got assassinated, and a lot of them got assassinated or imprisoned, and all of that. So yeah, it
It's
all.
it's it's interesting you brought that up. The Rainbow Coalition. You've heard of the White Panthers, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So now that you brought that up, I'm planning on resurrecting the White Panther Party.
Cool.
Um, and it's controversial because of the name, but there needs it's something I've been working on kind of like in the back burner. I wasn't going to talk about it, but now that you brought that up, is because you brought the Rainbow Coalition, which no very few people know about
Hmm.
the Rainbow Coalition, but there needs to be a counter to these white supremacist groups that are trying to seduce young white men into getting involved in white supremacy. There has to be a reaction to it. And the more I learn about the White Panther Party, the more I've just fallen in love with it. It's like there has to be something like that out there. There needs to be that. So I've been looking into doing that, in that shape or form.
I know the people to connect you to, because I
Absolutely.
actually, the Black Panther Party and the Panther Party in Washington State. The Panther Party was called the White Panther Party, and then the name was changed to the Panther Party.
Hmm.
Um, they were on an earlier episode, and I talk to them all the time, so I'll connect you.
That
And
would be great. I
yeah,
would love to interview them.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
working on a film project on revolution, so that'd be great.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I'll do that. Cool. Where can people reach you? Where can people follow you? Where do you want people to go to know more about
Yeah,
you?
go to Colonial Outcast on IG. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, of course. My Instagram handle is Mark Wayne Director, and of course, same with the is the Colonial Outcast. So follow the podcast. We got some great analysis. Greg Stoker does a great job, and we have some great guests on. So yeah, and check us out on Patreon if you want that extra content. We have what's called F Around Fridays, me and Greg, where we just kind of take a break from all the seriousness and add some levity to it. And that's our Patreon thing. So if you want to check that out as well, but yeah, just check out Colonial Outcast, and you'll see me now and then coming on the podcast.
Awesome.
So yeah,
Great.
thanks for
Great.
having me, Matthew. I really appreciate it. And by the way, I appreciate what you're doing on the criminal justice reform and the prison reform, which I it's another passion of mine. It's the whole system needs to be torn down. The prison
Yep.
system, it has to be gutted, completely gutted. It has been a horrific reality and a huge stain on this nation is our prison system. So I really deeply appreciate what you are doing with that and using your voice for that. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. All right, Mark. Well, thanks for coming on. I'd love to have you back in the future. I feel like we got a bunch more to talk about, but
Anytime you
yeah.
hit me up, we'll fit it in. It's therapeutic to
Yes,
to
it is.
to decompress with us.
Yeah. All right. Mark Wayne, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt.
All right. Big thank you to Mark Wayne for joining us today. It was really amazing. What a great conversation. So make sure you go follow Colonial Outcast Podcast. That's the podcast that Mark co hosts. And check him out at Mark Wayne Director on Instagram. Make sure you go watch Reimagining Safety. Spread the word about Reimagining Safety, reimaginangsafetymovie.com. We really need to get more people seeing the film and then making these connections and keep the podcast going. Please like, subscribe, share, let people know. And thank you, as always, for watching and listening in. And until next time, all power to the people.